Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. This morning, we will be in Numbers chapter 22, verse 21, through chapter 23, verse 30. As a reminder, Balaam was just sought after by Balak for a second time and has gone with the messengers. So Balaam got up in the morning, saddled his donkey, and went with the princes of Moab. Then God's anger was kindled because he went, and the angel of the Lord stood in the road to oppose him. Now he was riding on his donkey, and his 2 servants were with him. And the donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing in the road with his sword drawn in his hand. So the donkey turned aside from the road and went into the field. But Balaam beat the donkey to make her turn back to the road. Then the angel of the Lord stood in a path among the vineyards, where there was a wall on either side. And when the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she pressed herself into the wall, and crushed Balaam's foot against the wall. So he beat her again. Then the angel of the Lord went farther, and stood in a narrow place, where there was no way to turn, either to the right or to the left. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she crouched down under Balaam. Then Balaam was angry, and he beat his donkey with a staff. Then the Lord opened the mouth of the donkey, and she said to Balaam, "What have I done to you that you have beaten me these 3 times?" And Balaam said to the donkey, "You have made me look stupid. I wish there were a sword in my hand, for I would kill you right now." The donkey said to Balaam, "Am not I your donkey that you have ridden ever since I was yours until this day? Have I ever attempted to treat you this way?" And he said, "No." Then the Lord opened Balaam's eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way with his sword drawn in his hand. So he bowed his head and threw himself down with his face to the ground. The angel of the Lord said to him, "Why have you beaten your donkey these 3 times? Look, I came out to oppose you, because what you are doing is perverse before me. The donkey saw me and turned from me these 3 times. If she had not turned from me, I would have killed you, but saved her alive." Balaam said to the angel of the Lord, "I have sinned, for I did not know that you stood against me in the road. So now, if it is evil in your sight, I will go back home." But the angel of the Lord said to Balaam, "Go with the men, but you may only speak the word that I will speak to you." So Balaam went with the princes of Balak. When Balak heard that Balaam was coming, he went out to meet him at a city of Moab, which was on the border of the Arnon at the boundary of his territory. Balak said to Balaam, "Did I not send again and again to you to summon you? Why did you not come to me? Am I not able to honor you?" Balaam said to Balak, "Look, I have come to you. Now, am I able to speak just anything? I must speak only the word that God puts in my mouth." So Balaam went with Balak, and they came to Kiriath-Huzoth. And Balak sacrificed bulls and sheep, and sent some to Balaam and to the princes who were with him. Then on the next morning Balak took Balaam, and brought him up to Bamoth Baal. From there he saw the extent of the nation. Balaam said to Balak, "Build me 7 altars here, and prepare for me here 7 bulls and 7 rams." So Balak did just as Balaam had said. Balak and Balaam then offered on each altar a bull and a ram. Balaam said to Balak, "Station yourself by your burnt offering, and I will go off. Perhaps the Lord will come to meet me, and whatever he reveals to me I will tell you." Then he went to a deserted height. Then God met Balaam, who said to him, "I have prepared 7 altars, and I have offered on each altar a bull and a ram." Then the Lord put a message in Balaam's mouth and said, "Return to Balak, and speak what I tell you." So he returned to him, and he was still standing by his burnt offering, he and all the princes of Moab. Then Balaam uttered his oracle, saying, "Balak, the king of Moab, brought me from Aram, out of the mountains of the east, saying, 'Come, pronounce a curse on Jacob for me. Come, denounce Israel.' How can I curse one whom God has not cursed? Or how can I denounce one whom the Lord has not denounced? For from the top of the rocks I see them, from the hills I watch them. Indeed, a nation that lives alone, and it will not be reckoned among the nations. Who can count the dust of Jacob, or number the 4th part of Israel? Let me die the death of the upright, and let the end of my life be like theirs." Then Balak said to Balaam, "What have you done to me? I brought you to curse my enemies, but on the contrary, you have only blessed them." Balaam replied, "Must I not be careful to speak what the Lord has put in my mouth?" Balak said to him, "Please come with me to another place from which you can observe them. You will see only a part of them, but you will not see all of them. Curse them for me from there." So Balak brought Balaam to the field of Zophim, to the top of Pisgah, where he built 7 altars and offered a bull and a ram on each altar. And Balaam said to Balak, "Station yourself here by your burnt offering, while I meet the Lord there." Then the Lord met Balaam and put a message in his mouth and said, "Return to Balak and speak what I tell you." When Balaam came to him, he was still standing by his burnt offering, along with the princes of Moab. And Balak said to him, "What has the Lord spoken?" Balaam uttered his oracle and said, "Rise up, Balak, and hear. Listen to me, son of Zippor. God is not a man that he should lie, nor a human being that he should change his mind. Has he said, and will he not do it? Or has he spoken, and will he not make it happen? Indeed, I have received a command to bless. He has blessed, and I cannot reverse it. He has not looked on iniquity in Jacob, nor has he seen trouble in Israel. The Lord their God is with them. His acclamation as king is among them. God brought them out of Egypt. They have, as it were, the strength of a wild bull. For there is no spell against Jacob, nor is there any divination against Israel. At this time it must be said of Jacob and Israel, Look at what God has done. Indeed, the people will rise up like a lioness, and like a lion raises himself up, they will not lie down until they eat their prey and drink the blood of the slain." Balak said to Balaam, "Neither curse them at all, nor bless them at all." But Balaam replied to Balak, "Did I not tell you, all that the Lord speaks I must do?" Balak said to Balaam, "Come, please, I will take you to another place. Perhaps it will please God to let you curse them for me from there." So Balak took Balaam to the top of Peor, that looks toward the wilderness. Then Balaam said to Balak, "Build 7 altars here for me, and prepare 7 bulls and 7 rams." So Balak did as Balaam had said, and offered a bull and a ram on each altar. Oh, man. Yeah, so you have Balaam here going with the men who had called him to Balak. And it seemed as though he was fully intent on not saying the words of the Lord, but rather to acquiesce to them and curse Israel. But the angel of the Lord confronts him on his road to Moab while he's riding his donkey, and his donkey essentially saves him by lying down underneath of him. And the Lord miraculously opens the mouth of the donkey so that she speaks to Balaam. And and the angel of the Lord talks with Balaam and says, only my words shall you say to Balak. Balaam then goes to Balak, and they build 7 altars. And instead of cursing Israel, Balaam instead blesses Israel. But Balak doesn't like this, so he says, let's go to a different place. And maybe if we do that again, with more sacrifices, essentially more sacrifices, maybe God will change his mind. But God says through Balaam, in verse 18 of chapter 23, "Rise up, Balak, and hear. Listen to me, son of Zippor. God is not a man that he should lie, nor a human being that he should change his mind. Has he said, and will he not do it? Or has he spoken, and will he not make it happen?" And he goes on, but I've often heard this scripture perverted by Muslims to say, God is not a man. See, it says it right there. And just woodenly interpret it like that, to say that that Jesus isn't God, because God is not a man. But what does it say? God is not a man that he should lie, nor a human being that he should change his mind. God isn't influenced by whims of passion like a human being is, that at one moment he might think one way, and at another moment he might think a different way. But rather, has he said, and will he not do it? Or has he spoken, and will he not make it happen? The things that God does, the things that God decides are firm, and he has all knowledge available to him, and doesn't waver in his decisions like a man. So I think that's another reason why it's important to know what the Bible actually says, so that using context, you can defeat petty lies like that. Rise and go with them. God did not change his mind. Balaam would not now be in the will of God if he went with Balak's messengers. We can say that God did not change his will. He had clearly declared his will, that Israel is blessed, and Balaam had decisively rejected it. Now God prepared Balaam for judgment, to both test and reveal the wickedness of Balaam's heart. And Balaam rose in the morning. No doubt he woke up at the break of dawn. He could not wait to do the wrong his heart desired, and he is so happy God is blessing by allowing him to go. Yeah. It's interesting. This whole story kind of reveals the mentality that at least Balaam and Balak, but perhaps it's more widely applicable to the pagan mindset in general, in that, the gods are like us, like men, who might say one thing one day, but perhaps the next day they'll change. But I think this is a polemic against that, in saying that, no, God doesn't change his mind. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. Yeah, he was happy and excited, believing he had convinced God to say yes, with no idea what God was really doing. Yeah, he was certainly out of tune with what God actually desired. And God's anger was aroused because he went. Some might think this was unfair, seeing that God told Balaam to go, and then he was angry because he went. But Balaam only went because he had first rejected God's voice, both in conscience and clear command, and God should be angry about that. But the donkey saw the angel of the Lord. The donkey was more spiritually perceptive than the prophet. The donkey had no spiritual gifts, but at least acknowledged his Creator. The prophet had wonderful spiritual gifts, but also a disobedient heart and walk. The donkey turned aside out of the way. The donkey, responding to the angel of the Lord, turned one way, then another, then finally sat down to avoid judgment. The disobedient prophet suffered along the way, and also made the donkey suffer. The donkey is a perfect picture of a simple, unspectacular, yet obedient follower of God, sensitive to God's direction, a thorn to the disobedient, and a victim of the wrath of the disobedient. Yeah. I think oftentimes simple followers of God suffer when warning the disobedient, even though the disobedient are rushing headlong into their own destruction. For instance, John the Baptist warned, I think it was King Herod at the time, that he couldn't have his brother's wife. And for this, John was put into prison and subsequently beheaded. But what John was doing was an act of love to the king, and ultimately he will have to answer for what he did. And That's an example of somebody rushing into judgment and doing so at the cost of an obedient follower of Christ. When the donkey saw the angel of the Lord, she lay down under Balaam. The unusually difficult circumstances of this journey might have suggested to Balaam that his trip was not of God. Yet, Balaam probably took it all as being an attack from the enemy and used the circumstances to strengthen his hope that God wanted him to work as a prophet for hire. This shows the great difficulty of judging God's will by circumstances. Many circumstances can be interpreted two ways, if not more. The facts are one thing, but our interpretation of the facts is another matter. And we have to be careful both in which facts, in discerning the truth, and also in discerning what those things mean. Then the Lord opened the mouth of the donkey. God miraculously gave the donkey the ability to speak, and she did, and she rebuked the prophet for his ungodly punishment of her. We don't know the actual mechanism by which God gave the donkey the apparent mind and voice to speak, but it was certainly well within the capability of the Creator. And Jesus said, essentially, during his triumphal entry, if they, that is the people who were praising him, remained silent, then the stones would cry out. God is certainly capable to make creation cry out to him. And Balaam said to the donkey, Balaam was so irrational and angry that he answered back without hesitation. He seemed to be unimpressed by a donkey that carries on an intelligent conversation with him. For now I would kill you. These were cruel words from a wicked prophet. They are a chilling reminder of what the wicked have often done to true prophets who might hinder their evil ways. When asked if he had ever been treated this way before by the donkey, he said no. Balaam admitted that the donkey got the best of him in this conversation. Balaam had to humble himself before the donkey, admitting that she hadn't been this way before, so perhaps there was a good reason for her to be this way now. And the angel of the Lord, standing in the way with his drawn sword in hand. This made the will of God pretty clear in this matter. God told Balaam, about as loud and clear as it could be said, "Don't go, turn back now." But Balaam would not listen. "Your way is perverse before me." The angel of the Lord rebuked Balaam for his mistreatment of his donkey, but especially because Balaam's way was perverse. The word perverse carries the idea of going the wrong way in a rash manner. This was exactly Balaam's problem. See, this is the angel of the Lord, and that the angel of the Lord tells Balaam that his sin is against him personally. Your way is perverse before me. It indicates this is an Old Testament appearance of God, the Son, the second member of the Trinity, Jesus, before his incarnation as a baby in Bethlehem. Jesus temporarily appeared in some sort of human form for a specific divine purpose. And the angel of the Lord appears in many other places throughout the Old Testament, claiming honors due only to God and speaking as if he were God. And from John we know that no one has seen God at any time, but God, that is God the Son, has revealed him to them, essentially. I have sinned. This sounds humble enough, but it was obvious and easy to say when the angel of the Lord stood before Balaam with a drawn sword in hand. At that point, if you haven't recognized that you've screwed up in some way, then there's something really wrong with you. If it displeases you, I will turn back. Balaam seems undecided as to if he really was displeasing God. He asked, if it displeases you. God made his will clear to Balaam many times, yet Balaam still fished for the answer he wanted from God, and Balaam made it evident he did not want what God had already clearly revealed. 2 Peter 2:15 and 16 shows exactly where Balaam's heart was at. They have forsaken the right way and gone astray, following the way of Balaam the son of Beor, who loved the wages of unrighteousness. But he was rebuked for his iniquity. A dumb donkey, speaking with a man's voice, restrained the madness of the prophet. The root of Balaam's sin was a love for money. Jude 1:11 calls it the error of Balaam for profit. It is sobering to understand there is no sin that men will not commit just for the sake of money. A distinguished man was speaking to a distinguished woman and asked her, "Would you sleep with me for $1 million?" The woman carefully thought it over and said that she would. Then he asked, "Would you sleep with me for $50? The woman took great offense and said, "Do you think I am some kind of whore?" The man answered, "Ma'am, we've already established you are a harlot. Now we are only bargaining over price." The same attitude has led many away from Jesus, selling him for the sake of more money or more things. Yeah, it's a sobering thought to think of that men often exchange their Creator for a price. God help us not to go that way. Go with the men. In response to Balaam's hard heart, God gave Balaam over to his sinful desire. Again, God did not change his mind. Because of Balaam's hard heart, God sent Balaam on a path of judgment. "Am I not able to honor you?" Balak said. Here, two kindred hearts met. Balak's warm promise of reward sounded like music in Balaam's ears. Balak took Balaam and brought him up to the high places of Baal. After a bit of sacrifice, Balak then called upon Balaam to do what he hired him to do, to curse Israel, to rob them of their spiritual strength so they could be defeated in battle. "The word that God puts in my mouth, that I must speak." Balaam again protested that this was not in his hands. Perhaps he really believed and understood this, or perhaps this was his way of protecting himself in case he failed. Then he could say that it was God's fault and not his. Disclaimer, your curse is not guaranteed. Then the Lord put a word in Balaam's mouth. We might be surprised that God spoke to and through someone as obviously wicked as Balaam. But this shows us that spiritual giftedness does not equal spiritual maturity or holiness of life. God spoke through a donkey in the previous chapter, and now he spoke through a bigger donkey. Yeah, and even Saul, who acted very wickedly, was inspired to speak prophetically. So, the fact that God is speaking through a wicked man is no blanket approval of the man's life. When Balaam returned, Balak and all the princes of Moab were ready. They were ready to learn what their money had bought them from Balaam. Come curse Jacob for me, and come denounce Israel. God knew exactly what Balak wanted. He wanted a spiritual curse on Israel so that they could be defeated in battle. And how shall I curse whom God has not cursed? Yet Balaam or any other prophet could not curse Israel if God had not cursed them. Therefore Balak's money was wasted. Who can count the dust of Jacob or number 1/4 of Israel? Instead, through Balaam, God promised to bless Israel by making them a singular nation and blessing them with great size. Let me die the death of the righteous, and let my end be like his. Balaam concluded his oracle, another word for a prophecy, with this longing. Balaam was one of the many who longed to die the death of the righteous, yet have no desire to live the life of the righteous. The two go together. What have you done to me? The king of Moab was understandably disturbed. He paid good money for a particular outcome, and the opposite happened. Must I not take heed to speak what the Lord has put in my mouth? Perhaps Balaam was disappointed also. It isn't hard to sense a note of sorrow in this response of his. After all, he wanted to please his employer. Rise up, Balak, and hear. In this message, God rebuked Balak and taught him about the divine nature, that he's not a man, that he does not lie or change his mind, and he always performs his word, and that he has all strength. He has not observed iniquity in Jacob, nor has he seen wickedness in Israel. God also taught Balak about the people of God, Israel. He taught them that they were blessed, that they were walking in purity, that God was with Israel, had brought them out of Egypt, had protected them against all sorcery and divination, and that he would see them through to victory. Neither cursed them at all nor blessed them at all. Balak was very frustrated and essentially said, if you can't curse them, then at least don't go and bless them. Yeah, but Balaam did bless, which was a good thing that the prophet did, despite all of his folly. Anywho, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you have a great day. Bye.